Okay, good morning, everyone. You, you had a good night rest? Yeah, you ready for more dukkha, more suffering, more things? So at least we can sleep well, and we can deal with the dukkha when it comes in the suttas. Yeah, so otherwise it's hard to deal with. You need a little bit of happiness in this life. So we're going to carry on with the Arya Pariyesana Sutta, the noble search or the noble quest, and we're going to see if we can hurry ourselves up on this noble quest because we want to walk in the footsteps of the Buddha. That's the idea. So, good. Buddha in Cantonese, Pho. Is that right? Pho. How do you say? Fato. So okay, Mandarin is Pho, is it? Or is it? Okay. What is it in Cantonese? Fat. Fat. That's why it's so big, is it? That's because it's so fat. Is that why? The Chinese Buddha is so fat. Okay. That's interesting. Okay. Okay, good. So I think the idea of Pho in Mandarin is actually comes from Buddha. It's derived from Buddha, right, originally, because F and B are kind of interchangeable, and then Buddha becomes Pho somehow when it transferred. Yeah, and fat probably somehow related as well. Yeah. It's all related. Yeah. Okay, good. Anyway, so let's come back to this sutta. So we have looked at all the noble search and the ignoble search, and now the Buddha has kind of laid the foundations, and now he will talk about exactly what happened to him when he was reflecting in this way. This is the next part. The next part here. So let's just read it out and see what happens. So the Buddha says, mendicants, we're now on the second last paragraph in this particular sutta, or this extract from the sutta. Can you understand anything at all here? Yeah, you can understand. Can you still not understand anything here? No understanding here? No? Sorry? Can you understand? No, sorry, okay, probably not. Obviously not. Okay.
I hear about maybe half.
You can hear that I speak. You know that I'm speaking here. Yeah. Yeah.
Because you need to speak like 100 times slower, but
that's impossible. I can't do that. This is minimum speed for me. Usually much faster. This is already very slow already. So don't worry about it. Okay, good. Thank you. So you, don't know what to do. I guess maybe you get the recording and then play it on 100 times slower. You get the recording. And then you can play on slow later on. Super slow. Okay, good. So the Buddha says the following. Mendicants, before my awakening, when I was still an unawakened but intent on awakening, I too, being liable to be reborn, sought what is also liable to be reborn. Myself liable to grow old, liable to become sick, liable to die, liable to sorrow, liable to become corrupted. I sought what is also liable to these things. Then it occurred to me, why do I, being liable to be reborn, grow old, become sick, sorrow, die, and become corrupted, seek things that have the same nature? Why don't I seek the freedom from birth, the freedom from old age, the freedom from illness, the freedom from death, the freedom from sorrow, the freedom from corruption, the supreme sanctuary from the yoke, extinguishment or nibbana? So the Buddha to be, finally it is dawning on him. You will remember the suttas. This is all very nicely kind of set out in the Mahapadana Sutta in the Digha Nikaya, where the Buddha sees the kind of the divine messengers. You know the word, the divine messenger, the Deva Dutta in Pali. The Deva is the other kind of the gods, right? Dutta is a messenger, someone who brings a message. And these are called the Deva Duttas. The Devas, they bring the message of old age, of sickness. This is what the Devas bring. These are the Deva Duttas, divine messengers. You think they would bring something better than that, right? But actually, no, they bring old age and death. I don't know why they're called divine messengers, but that's what they're called, because it's profound, in a certain way. And The Mahabodhana Sutta is very it's a bit mythological, and it's not such a nice sutta. But there's another sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses, called the Sukkumala Sutta, that the Buddha talks about his life before his awakening, when he was still just living the ordinary life. And he talks about living in a luxury for those days. Luxury wasn't that luxurious in those days, yeah, but he had a few different houses. He had very good clothes, clothes from Benares. Benares is the capital of cloth in ancient India, and it still is today. Nothing has really changed in India. 2,500 years is like a blink of an eye in Indian history. India, very stable, doesn't change very much. How many people have been to India? How many people been to India? You've been to India? Have you been on a pilgrimage tour? Yeah, you've been there. Okay. Have you been on a pilgrimage as well? No, just other. Just for business trip, okay, yeah, pilgrimage much better. Forget about business, yeah. The real business is pilgrimage. The real. So I would really recommend it. I personally, I love India. I find it such a fascinating country. People are so spiritual, and it goes back 2,500, this ancient culture. The Indian culture, I think, maybe the most influential culture in the whole world. In terms of its, the spread of ideas coming from India. The Buddhist ideas is one example. They're spreading over the world. The Indian languages found across the world, the Indo-European languages. It's a very influential culture in so many ways when you look at it historically, and very ancient culture, going back to the Indus Valley civilization, the remains going back 10,000 years. Some of those remains going back there is very, very old. So it's a very fascinating country because it's very different from what I am used to in the West. The West is mostly a secular society. People are not really religious. In India, people are really religious. A lot of the time, they believe in stupid things, and it's not really worthwhile. But sometimes in that kind of society, you get people like the Buddha. The people like the Buddha will arise in a society where spirituality is appreciated. Where if you are a monk, if you are a renunciant, you can walk out into the forest and practice, because that is part of the culture in a sense. That is where you get Buddhas. That is where you get people who have profound insight and understanding into the nature of reality. This is why the Buddha arises always in India. He has to rise in a culture that appreciates the spiritual path, where other people are already practicing. It is not so far to go. If you grow up in Australia, the chance of becoming a Buddha is 0, I think, because the society is not really suited for that. Whereas India, already you are a long way on the path. People already practicing samadhi. People already supporting mendicants. Already have an appreciation for what is going on. And so this is that kind of society. The ancient Indian society. And just coming back to this particular sutta again, they're talking about the Devadutas and these kind of things. The Buddha was living there, Benares, the Benares cloth. He had all of the nice things in that ancient society. And then he sees these Devadutas. This is the real side. It's not just a mythology. He talks about actually realizing for himself. It's not, in the story, he goes out into the city, he sees the old man, the dead man. That's just a mythology. That's not really what happened. If you go to this other sutta, he knew, of course, everyone knows about this. You don't have to go into the city to see a sick man. That's kind of crazy idea. That's obviously not how life works. Everyone knows about sickness and old age, right? It's kind of bleeding obvious. And so the Buddha, he saw this. And when he saw this, he reflected on it in a very deep way. And this is exactly where this particular sutta comes in. This is the reflection that he did. Old age, wait a minute, there's a fundamental problem here. There's something really problematic going on. How can I go about my ordinary life pretending that these things don't exist, pretending that these things are not an issue, grasping onto the things around me, grasping onto a wife, grasping onto a son, grasping onto all of these things. How can I grasp onto these things when I know it's going to lead to dukkha? It's going to lead to suffering. The more I attach to the things in the world, then when death, old age finally comes, it's going to be a problem. And the Buddha sees things with clarity. Yeah, this is one of the reasons that one of the meanings of the idea of vipassana. Vipassana means to see clearly. Insight is not such a good translation. Seeing clearly is far better. I wrote an email to Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi. He's one of the greatest translators into the English language, as I mentioned the other day. And I said to him, Vipassana, we should translate as clear seeing. That's what it means. It doesn't mean insight. And you know what he said? He said, yes, I agree, but now we have translated it like this for so long, we can't change it now. That's what he said. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, it's a reasonable argument. I have to admit, he probably has a point. But sometimes I also think, well, if it is wrong, well, maybe we should change, or people don't get the wrong idea. And so one of the previous Buddha was called Vipassi. And Vipassi, the name, basically means someone who sees clearly. It's the same word as Vipassana, yeah, the ancient Buddha, Vipassi. And so he sees clearly. And what does he see? Well, he sees these kind of things, the simple things of life. Yeah, we are all faced with these things. What is the difference between us and the Buddha? The only difference is he took it on board much more powerfully, with more mindfulness, with more clarity. So it penetrated deep inside, and it motivated him to become a monastic for that reason. That is really the only difference. The reason you are here on this retreat is also for part of the reason you are here is because of these kind of things, yeah? You realize that there are problems with life. There are issues. If you really want to find happiness, you have to look somewhere else. This is, all of us realize that to some extent, is that the Buddha realized it more deeply. And so this is what is going on here, yeah? This is actually what is happening. He's still living at home. He reflects on these things, and then he decides to become a monk. And he says, while I was still unawakened, but intent on awakening. The word intent on awakening is, you know what word that is? Don't say anything, Freddie, because I know what it is. You don't have to tell me. So, I'm just testing people to see here. What was that? Bodhisattva, yes, exactly. Did you know that? Yeah? Yeah, okay, because you have been reading the suttas. Did I say yesterday already here? Did I? Okay, I thought I said 4 years ago when I was here last time. Okay, maybe I said yesterday already. I talk too much, that's the problem. I say many things, I can't even remember what I've said. It's kind of awkward here. Bodhisattva means the one who is intent on awakening, right? And that is very, very interesting, because usually when we think about the word bodhisattva or bodhisattva in Sanskrit, we think about something else. We don't think about someone who's intent on awakening. We think about someone who's been practicing for 4 incalculable eons, who made that vow. I said this yesterday, I remember that. Who made the vow under the previous Buddha Dipankara. He was the ascetic Sumedha. Yeah, that we do remember. But that actually is the mythology. The real meaning is the one who is intent on awakening. When was the Buddha intent on awakening? Well, at this point. When he understood the danger in life, when he went forth, yeah, in his last life, that is when he was a bodhisattva in the suttas, not some incalculable time before. It's a different way of thinking about the Buddha. It makes the Buddha more human. It makes the Buddha more relatable, because that is something we can relate to. Someone who's been practicing for 4 incalculable eons, very difficult to relate to that kind of person. Yeah, what does that mean? How does it remember from one life to the next one? What is actually going on there? It's much more strange, much more difficult to square with our understanding of the world. And so this is the right way, I think, of thinking about the Bodhisattva. Yeah, the last life, he goes forth. That is the Samma Sankappa, the second factor of the Noble Eightfold Path, when he becomes intent on awakening. That is the intention to renounce, nekama sankappa, that you find there. The intent to renounce, yeah? That is the same thing here. Bodhisattva and nekama sankappa means basically the same thing, I think, yeah. Haven't thought of that before, that's interesting. Yes, that may be roughly the same meaning here. You are a bodhisattva, you are intent on awakening, you are intent on renunciation. So this is what the Buddha does in his last life, thinking about these things in a deep way here. And so he understands, yeah, this is kind of interesting. I too, being liable to be reborn. And this was what I was saying yesterday about sometimes you will hear that secular Buddhists say that actually there's no rebirth and the Buddha just accepted it from the local culture. And the response from Buddhists is, well, actually the Buddha did investigate these things. He didn't just accept it. But here it looks like he accepted it again. Yeah, this is kind of that strange thing. And I think the truth is that it's a bit of both. He accepted it, or he thought, yeah, maybe this is true. At the same time, he investigated. And this is kind of one of the things about the Buddha, which is very outstanding in the suttas. He investigates everything. He doesn't take things on board just out of faith or just out of, because other people say so. Everything is investigated. And he is very radical in that way. You know the life story of the Buddha, and this is the earlier part of this particular sutta. He goes to the various teachers, first of all, Alara Kalama, Uddaka Ramaputta, and also other teachers. So first of all, he's quite humble. He doesn't have a big ego. He doesn't say, I'm going to do this on my own. It goes to the existing teachers. That's already an example for how to live our lives. Sometimes people are too full of themselves, and they think that, I'm just going to do everything on my own, forget about these scriptures or whatever, and of course you don't get anywhere, because these things are really profound and really difficult. And so this is the first thing about the Buddha. He's humble in that sense. But then, when that path doesn't lead where he goes, then he rejects it, and he goes out on his own. And ultimately the Buddha rejects everything around him. This is really, really hard to do. He rejects the Jaina practices, which are the Attakilamatanu Yoga, the self-mortification or the tormenting of the body. He rejects that. That was the mainstream spiritual practice at the time. He rejects the highest kind of meditation that these two meditation teachers could teach, the sphere of nothingness, the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception, the highest kind of possible meditations. He rejects everything. Then, on top of that, he only has 5 friends in the whole world at this point. They also leave him. He's only completely by himself. That is really, really hard to do. And most people, we depend on the world around us. We depend on other people. We depend on our society for our identity, for a feeling of support. Very few people are capable of just going completely on their own. It's very, very difficult to do. And that is how society can control you. This is how the world controls you, by saying, if you don't behave properly, you become an outcast. And because you don't want to be an outcast, you say, okay, I'll follow your whatever you say. This is how we get controlled by groups, or by societies, or by religions, or by whoever. They control us, especially in cults, very commonly a way of controlling you. Either you follow what the leader says, or you become an outcast. And because you are so dependent on that cult, you are incapable. You kind of follow stupid things, even though you know it is bad. And so the fact that the Buddha to be is able to do this is the sign of this very powerful spiritual qualities. He leaves everyone behind, and then he seeks for the truth. He assumes that he is subject to being reborn. Later on, he checks that out by remembering his past lives. Myself liable to grow old. Myself liable to die. An ordinary human being, the Buddha to be, is liable to grow old, liable to die. There is a sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya where the Buddha and Venerable Ananda, they are kind of hanging out together. Hanging out, I'm not sure if hanging out is a respectful term, but anyway, they're kind of, they are there, they're kind of, they are together anyway. And Venerable Ananda looks at the Buddha, and he kind of looks at the Buddha, and he says, oh, Master, you're shine. You're not shining like the way you did before. Your skin is kind of flaccid. There's wrinkles everywhere. Your kind of muscles are deteriorating. And it's basically old age. And then the Buddha says, yes, that's what happens. When you have a human body, that's what happens to you. The Buddha is like everyone else. He too must become old. He too must die. It's just that he doesn't re-die. That's the only difference. So re-death is the problem, not death. The Buddha too had to die. And so, again, the humanity of the Buddha comes out in the suttas. In the suttas, you hear about the Buddha having a backache. And he says to Venerable Sariputta or one of the other monks, please carry on talking because I need to stretch my back. This is the humanity, the illness. Another place, he gets very sick towards the end of his life. He eats some kind of poisoned food or whatever, gets really, really sick as a consequence. The humanity of the Buddha. It's almost like you feel compassion for the Buddha. Wow, we should feel compassion for the Buddha because he too is suffering from these things when these things are happening. No one wants to be sick. No one wants this kind of pain. So thinking about the Buddha in the right way is really important to be able to relate to the Buddha. You want to think a bit about the Buddha like someone you can actually meet, someone you can talk to her, someone you can take as your teacher. And then when you read the suttas, I come back to this later on, it feels like the Buddha is teaching you. He is a human being talking to another human being. He's not some kind of different reality which doesn't really relate to you properly. So the Buddha gets old. I myself am liable. It says here, it's it's pixels on screen. It's not, I was going to say black on white, but it's more like pixels on screen. It's right. It's it's there. I'm liable to die, liable to sorrow. The Buddha is liable to sorrow. He too, if his family members die and everything gets lost, he too would probably feel some, maybe not as much as most people because he has a lot of wisdom, obviously, but still there would be some sorrow there when the world goes in the wrong way, when your attachments are challenged. The last thing, liable to be corrupted. The Buddha too understands the dangers of the defilements of the mind. The Buddha also had defilements. We know that in some of the other suttas it talks about his defilements. This is one of the suttas that I usually read out on this retreat. It's called the Dveda Vitaka Sutta, the two kinds of thoughts. And the Buddha says, whenever a thought arose connected with ill will, connected with harming, connected with sensuality, these are the root defilements of the mind. And I don't think the Buddha had these things very strongly. He obviously was quite weak. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to do what he did. But they were still there to some extent. And so he knows that as long as these defilements are in the mind, they can grow if you go in the wrong way. And if you live an ordinary life and you hang out with the wrong people, they will grow. They will manifest, they become stronger. And down the line, later on in your life or another life or whatever, they may come out in force and they become very, very problematic and they drag you down to a bad rebirth and all of these kind of terrible things. That is the potential for these things. Now is the opportunity to overcome these things. The Buddha to be just like us. Basically the same thing. He also liable to all of these things. Liable to defilements, liable to wrong views. That's in the Bodhiraja Kumara Sutta, where the Buddha says, I too, before my awakening, thought that happiness was to be gained through suffering. That's why I did the ascetic practices. So again and again, we see these things. So the reason I'm saying these things is not because I don't respect the Buddha's achievement. Of course, that is the other side of the Buddha. The reason why I say these things is because after 2,500 years of history, it's hard to relate to the Buddha in this particular way. And so you want to relate to him in the right way. And to me, that is what is so magnificent about the Buddha, is that it is precisely an ordinary human being who is able to transform himself in the way he did. That is what is so extraordinary. That is what is so worthy of respect. If the Buddha is a different kind of being, then who knows if it is worthy of respect or not? It's very difficult to say. God, if you are someone who believes in a God, should we bow down to that God? I mean, what has that God ever done? They've just been a God all the time. Did they do anything impressive? Not really. They were just God. So the Buddha is someone who actually has done something very impressive, who has changed himself, become something else, purified himself. That, to me, is really worthy of respect. But if you have always been the creator God of the universe, okay, thank you for creating the world, or maybe we should not say thank you because maybe that was a mistake. That's what I reckon. If God created this world, he made a mistake. Yeah, that was the first mistake he did. It's the only thing he ever did and the first mistake he did. That's the way I see it. There's some truth to that, right? This is why it's kind of funny, because there is some truth to it. Most people don't recognize that, but actually from a Buddhist point of view, it clearly was a mistake if he did that. And that's why the whole idea of a God creating the world, it doesn't really make much sense. At least to me, it makes no sense at all. I don't understand how people can really believe that. Anyway, I'm going to have a little bit of water. Okay, so then the Buddha, he thinks about all of these things. He sees the danger, and instead of going into the world and then acquiring more of these things, more of these problems, he asks himself the question, why don't I seek the freedom from all of these things? So again, it is a freedom from these things. It's not a thing in particular that he's looking for. It's not a place that he wants to go, like Nibbana as a place. It's a freedom from suffering that he's looking for. So it doesn't. This doesn't say anything about what Nibbana is. It just means that Nibbana is the freedom from these things. It is a freedom from dukkha. That's really what Nibbana is. And so this is what he does. So I have forgotten about the time a little bit. Would it be nice to have a little bit of a break? Would that be a good idea? Yes, let's have a short break, maybe till 10:05 or something, and then we'll carry on in a few minutes. Actually, the camera won't see it anymore. Maybe that's enough.